for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson.
I'm Katy Steele.
I'm Jack Prince.
And we've got quite a show for you today. We've got quite a few things to discuss, among which includes a Supreme Court case that was just heard this week about free speech. We'll talk about that a little bit. We got to talk about some past history in Philadelphia. There's a story that just came out regarding the bombing of the Move people, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Plus, I got a couple of off-the-cuff stories here, including a woman who has been in trouble with Oklahoma authorities for 20 years, and she didn't know it. And we'll discuss that in just a little bit here. In the meantime, a couple of reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime you like at Spreaker.com or at Stitcher.com. Just do a search for Southpaws there. You can find us on Apple Podcasts by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and WOOL Bellows Falls, Vermont. So make sure you listen to us there. Please donate your time and or your money to your local Pacifica station because they could always use the help. And before we get started, speaking of Pacifica, there has been a death in the Pacifica family that I want to mention real quickly here. Bob Fass, who was the host of Radio Unnameable at WBAI in New York, passed away recently. I have this. This is InsideRadio.com reporting. Freeform radio pioneer Bob Fass, who hosted Radio Unnameable for more than 50 years on Pacifica Foundation Variety WBAI in New York, has died at the age of 87. The late-night folk music program originated at the station in the 1960s and continued as a 3-hour Friday night show up until his death as Foss relocated from New York to North Carolina. WBAI's Larry Josephson told NPR Radio, quote, Bob Foss more or less invented what we call live radio. No structure, no script, all improvised, and there was nothing like Bob's program on the radio at the time, end of quote. According to Wikipedia, the name of his show comes from the book The Unnameable, which was written by Samuel Beckett. Foss was reading that book at the time. He said his signature greeting, which was "Good morning, Cabal," came from a listener. So he said someone sent him a postcard suggesting the phrase "Good morning, Cabal." He said he looked it up in the dictionary and discovered that the word cabal comes from horse. Originally, people met on horseback at night with their identities concealed, even from each other, to plot or plan something subversive. And I thought, that's it. Good morning, Cabal. Beautiful. Fantastic stuff. He has had many guests on his show. Musical guests have included Joni Mitchell, Carly Simon, Bob Dylan. Arlo Guthrie performed Alice's Restaurant on his show. And it was the earliest recording because it had not been recorded at that point. So it was the first time that it was performed on radio. Arlo Guthrie gave huge props to Foss in a 1987 NPR interview. So, yeah, so our sympathies to Bob's family and to his colleagues at WBAI and, for that matter, across the Pacifica Radio Network. So,
rest in peace, Bob.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. A lot of what we do now would not be possible without Bob Foss. He actually went to the engineer WBAI when he first started his show and asked him, how many callers can I get on the air at the same time? So they configured some sort of system, and he was able to get 10 callers on his show at once, which was unheard of back in those days. So he was truly, truly a pioneer. And since we're talking about speech and free speech for that matter, I want to get to this story. This is Mark Sherman writing for the Associated Press. This is dated April 28th out of Washington. A wary Supreme Court on Wednesday weighed whether public schools can discipline students for things they say off campus, worrying about overly restricting speech on the one hand and leaving educators powerless to deal with bullying on the other. The justices hearing arguments in the case of a 14-year-old high school freshman's Snapchat F-bombs struggled to fit the need to protect students' political and religious expression with the ability of schools to get at disruptive, even potentially dangerous speech that occurs outside the school setting. In one of many examples members of the court offered, Justice Elena Kagan described boys who keep a sexually charged online ranking of girls based on their looks. Kagan asked, quote, "You can't put people in jail for commenting on people's appearance, but shouldn't a school be able to deal with it?" End of quote. The court tested out possible outcomes in the case of the student's profanity-laced social media rant, which Justice Brett Kavanaugh described as her blowing off steam just like millions of kids do. Kavanaugh is one of several justices who have children in high school or recently did. The court heard just under 2 hours of arguments by telephone because of the coronavirus pandemic, well beyond the allotted 60 minutes. Just that alone shows that they're giving this case some very high profile. The current dispute stems from Tinker versus Des Moines, the Vietnam-era case of a high school in Des Moines, Iowa, that suspended students who wore armbands to protest the war. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court sided with the students, declaring students don't shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. The court also then held that schools retain the authority to restrict speech that would disrupt the school environment. At the center of the case is Brandy Levy of Mahanoy City, Pennsylvania. Levy and a friend were at a convenience store when she used Snapchat to express her frustration at being kept on her high school's junior varsity cheerleading squad for another year. She tried out for the varsity squad and didn't get in. So this is where she was upset. In a post that also contained a photo in which she and a classmate raised their middle fingers, she wrote, "F school, F softball, F cheer, F everything." A second post questioned how an incoming freshman could have made the varsity squad. The posts were brought to the attention of the team's coaches, who suspended Levy from the cheerleading team for 1 year. Levy's parents responded with a federal lawsuit claiming the suspension violated their daughter's constitutional rights to free speech. The case's potential importance grew when the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia also sided with Levy and held the schools can't impose discipline for what students say when they're off campus. American Civil Liberties Union lawyer David Cole, who is representing Levy, urged the justices to affirm the clean line the appeals court drew, making clear educators have no authority over children when they are not under a school's supervision. Cole said, quote, "Expanding Tinker would transform a limited exception into a 24/7 rule," end of quote. But several justices said the campus border is not so clear in the age of the internet and the remote learning that has come with the pandemic. Chief Justice John Roberts asked, quote, "How does that fit with modern technology?" End of quote. The school district and the Biden administration both argued that the justices should reject the appellate ruling because it draws an artificial line. Suspending Levy from cheerleading was a reasonable response because she targeted her coaches and a teammate's ability to compete. That is according to Lisa Blatt, who is representing the school district. Referring to a cheerleading formation, Blatt said that Levy is, quote, "not somebody you'd want at the bottom of the pyramid," end of quote. But if the court didn't appear ready to embrace Levy's argument, some justices also were concerned that a ruling for the district could give schools too much power to shut down speech they just don't like. Justice Sonia Sotomayor asked this, quote, Kids basically talk to their classmates. Most of their conversation is about school. Most of their exchanges have to do with their perceptions of the authoritarian nature of their teachers and others. And why isn't this any different than just that the coach of this team took personal offense? End of quote. She noted that her law clerks told her that among teenagers, quote, how much you curse is a badge of honor, end of quote.
Also among adults.
Yes, exactly. Kavanaugh also said the coach maybe went too far by suspending Levy. Kavanaugh added, quote, but as a judge and maybe as a coach and a parent too, it seems like maybe a bit of overreaction by the coach, end of quote. By the end of the arguments, there was perhaps a sense among the justices of Levy's case, a teenager venting her unhappiness about an extracurricular program may not be the best one to use to write a sweeping rule about student speech in the digital age. A decision is expected by late June. So that's what the Supreme Court is having to weigh. How much power do you give to the school versus how much speech are students entitled to off school property? Katie, you've got two children.
Yep, I've got two older ones in their early 20s. Both did high school sports. And both tried out for varsity and ended up making JV at least 1 year. They were upset. They may have gone on Snapchat and said something like that. I don't know because I wasn't on their Snapchat. I'll be completely honest. Mm-hmm. And if they did, I don't think I would have been that upset about it. What upsets me the most about this case is the power-hungry coach. The fact that we're in a country where instead of doing what's best for our kids, we're concerned about maintaining power over them. You know, like they're not going to grow up soon enough and be the ones that have to handle power. Is this the example we want to set?
Jack, you're a retired educator, 30 years.
Yeah, I agree with Katie. It looks like this coach is taking himself way too seriously, which is, in my opinion, having had the experience you just mentioned, rampant in sports. And I don't want to zero in on the cheerleading coach, but most of the cheerleading coaches that I've seen are just somebody in the community that is not necessarily in the classroom with the students, not necessarily in the atmosphere of education. And I can't make a blanket statement, but it seemed like they all took it as if they had some kind of administrative power that really shouldn't be inherent in a position as a cheerleading coach. And what you do is you just bring a authoritarian separation even deeper with these kinds of actions. And in this climate, that's not what's needed. You have to understand the ego of this young woman. You have to go over with your arm around her and explain the technical reason why she may not have qualified for the varsity. You just can't send out an edict and not expect her to respond very similar to what she did.
Exactly. Coaching is about life lessons, right? It's about helping to raise these kids into good adults that are going to leave the world better than they found it. It's not about power. It's not about, making kids do what you want them to do. You're never going to make another human being do what you want them to do. And we focus on that so much as a society, and in cheerleading, it's a big deal to be able to trust each other. So I can see why you have to point that out. You have to say, listen, and that's something you got to teach these kids, because that's what else are they going to leave that sport with if it isn't those kind of lessons,
Yeah. I went to many coaching clinics through the years on the high school and the college level, and coached with one coach who's at Notre Dame today, one of the leading coaches in America for a number of years. And all these conferences, there was one statement that stuck with me after the fervor of trying to win, and that was, I can't remember where it was at, down in Detroit somewhere, a coach's conference speaker said, if we can retire having never hurt one of our athletes, and I'm not talking about stepping on their toes physically, I'm talking about hurting them psychologically or in some way that's contrary to their progress as a young person. That's not the criteria most young, eager, aggressive coaches go into coaching, thinking about damaging one of these young people that will go on for another 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the coaches I've been around and known, and I've known some really great coaches closely in my own life, but the ones that I've been around in school atmospheres and the ones that I had access to were very much concerned with winning. Yep. Winning was always their priority, and it was never about, how that kid was going to leave, and it's too bad.
Yep. Was it George Halas that said, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing?
Yeah, That's pretty much an imperialistic train of thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ask the Indians, the Native Americans, what they think of that motto.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of football, you see that Aaron Rodgers told Green Bay, I don't want to play for you guys this coming season.
I think he secretly wants to come to Detroit. What do you think?
I know you guys are laughing, but I've got a Green Bay Packers fan at home that was devastated getting ready to watch the draft last night, and I've been scared to even look. Is he still with the Packers, right?
Yeah, for now.
Okay.
They were going to trade him.
Pray for me if he's not.
I believe they were going to put together a trade with the Raiders. And
see, that's where he wants to end up. Yeah.
The Packers said, nope, not going to happen.
Well, he's a California boy. He came from California. Did you see him on the quiz show?
I did not see him.
I heard he was an amazing Jeopardy host.
Yeah.
And see, that's the thing. I think that's really what he wants to do. I think he wants to get out of playing football so that he can host
he's going
Jeopardy.
to eventually anyways. You can't play forever. So.
No.
That'd be a good transition for him.
Hey, I'm still rooting for Mayim Bialik as host of Jeopardy.
Oh, the Blossom, right?
Yes. And you know who finally is going to get his chance to host Jeopardy? The petition finally got in, and the producers had to relent. LeVar Burton is going to guest host Jeopardy after a online petition got like tens of thousands of signatures.
He'd be great. He'd be great at that.
Yes, he would. Speaking of things that people are great at that they probably shouldn't be in this case, Jack, you have predicted the future once again. We talked about this Killology speaker, last week, 2 weeks ago on this show?
Yeah.
Isn't it funny that he was supposed to be in Michigan this week?
I did not know that.
We didn't know.
No, it was out of the blue when I saw that article pop up on my page.
I heard his name mentioned, and I did some research, or I wouldn't even known about it. The thing that's shocking to me is Channel 8 mentioned this story with none of the, how do I say this, trimmings. Some of his quotes about you'll have better sex if you after a day you kill somebody, which is atrocious. Or, well, let's put it this way. None of the negative side. They had it like, here's a speaker who's coming to Michigan.
Yes, he's been training for all these years, some of the most blah, 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 all the
Yeah.
different forces. And I was reading it going, he's a psychopath. You're not going to mention the fact that he's coming here to train them to be
In this
okay with
atmosphere?
killing.
Are you kidding me?
And that's the thing. It's like coaching is no longer about raising kids. It's about winning. And policing is no longer about public safety. It's about killing. And like the big thing that I'm starting to comprehend here is that humanity itself is what we're losing. We are losing it. And we're not losing it on accident. We're trading it for machines. And I think the people with the most money and power don't care if there is 1% left of humanity and the rest is all machines, as long as they're a part of that 1%. And humanity won't look like what it looks like now because they're going to erase everything good about it. The only thing that will be left will be the evil that has condensed all of the power and resources at the top.
And, of course, you know why they won't share that quote on Channel 8, because the DeVos family doesn't want any local station to talk about anything having to do with sex on the air.
Yeah, well.
Or climate change.
But even if you look at his advertised, you can look it up on Google. Didn't you guys look into that? Because I wasn't here last week. Somebody said, well, I've got him on Google, didn't you say?
Yeah, I actually looked him up on, I think it was Wikipedia or Google. Yeah.
And I'm paraphrasing, but what you run into is his job is to make police feel better about killing.
Oh, yeah.
And not just feel better, feel good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It shouldn't be anything that they have to worry
Their
about.
job is to erase the humanity. That's what I'm saying. They are deprogramming the humanity out of these people.
Yep.
And it's terrifying.
It is.
Yeah, in a parallel context, talking about dehumanizing individuals, I watched the documentary Eliminate All the Brutes, an award-winning documentary. I just saw it 2 days ago. And they go into details. There's 4 sections. I highly recommend it to you guys.
Okay.
And it shows the speeches, the actual college-presented speeches that categorize humans into 3 categories. And the black and the brown-skinned human beings weren't human. And this was not a racist in Mississippi. This was in Harvard and Yale lecture halls. Again, we've seen it when the conservatives had the movies, you go into the ground and you get the orgs out, right? Your enemy wasn't born of a woman. It somehow came out of the rocks in a bag, an orc. And so when you see them with their heads being cut off, it just doesn't have the same impact. We're
Right.
good at taking Japs. What are some other derogatory names? The Krauts.
Nazis.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's-
It goes on and on
Yep.
because that's not a human moniker.
Right. As long as you can dehumanize them and take that away, then you can destroy them and treat them
Exactly.
The Viet Cong.
Viet Cong. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder, did the definition of violence always include property? Because I feel like this was slid in recently. I don't think property was involved in the definition of violence before. But what they're doing is they're transitioning violence from hurting people, the definition of it, the very definition of it, to hurting property. And we have to call that out. That is a huge, we do every time we talk about it on the show, but do it in real life because it is a huge deal. It's not just a slip of the tongue. It's not an innocent mistake. It matters.
Well,
Really does.
I've got this story. This is Niraj Waraku writing for the Detroit Free Press. This is dated April 27th. Facing an outcry, the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police has canceled an upcoming training session in Metro Detroit of local police chiefs featuring a controversial speaker. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman often talks about how law enforcement can reduce its inhibitions to kill if needed in the line of duty. Robert Stevenson, executive director of the Police Chiefs Association, told the Detroit Free Press it made the decision to cancel the event, which was set for May 26th and 27th, and of all places, a Novi evangelical church, after the group and the church had received complaints. Stevenson said the training was meant to address post-traumatic stress disorder issues that some officers may face after killing someone, such as in the recent case of a Dearborn police officer who took his own life last year after shooting a man to death in 2015. I'm just going to stop right there. It has nothing to do with addressing post-traumatic stress disorder.
You should have post-traumatic stress disorder for killing somebody.
Exactly.
It's
Absolutely.
natural. It's there for a
Exactly.
reason. You're not supposed to kill people.
And I talk
Exactly.
to mothers who have this terrible fear that the returning son from Afghanistan or wherever we've sent our soldiers needlessly is going to have a higher rate of suicide as any wartime returnee. And I say, why? 3 letters.
Yeah.
Why? Why
Why?
do you think that is?
What do you think they did over there to make them not
Yeah.
be able to live with themselves when they got home?
Exactly. Was the battle any more intense than the Battle of the Bulge or D-Day? Far
Right,
from it.
right.
What we've learned as a military in this country is how to kill from a distance.
Yep.
Let's be totally honest about it.
Yeah, because that way you're not attached to it. That way
Exactly.
you don't even.
But even then, you're still attached to it, Jack. We talked on this show a couple of years ago about the high rate of suicides among servicemen
like snipers
who are
and stuff. Yeah.
drone operators,
Oh, okay.
because they're actually watching this on a camera live as it happens,
Yeah.
even though they're thousands of miles away sitting in a
Yeah,
bunker
distance
or
doesn't
whatever.
do anything. Your conscience can figure it out, like the guy that flew the Enola Gay, who had breakdown after breakdown. It was the plane that dropped the bomb in Hiroshima.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Let me continue here. Over the past week, videos of some of Grossman's previous remarks at training sessions about police shootings, including one about the feeling of sex after killing someone, have gone viral on social media, prompting criticism from advocates of police reform. On Sunday, the executive director of a Detroit group tweeted that Grossman was due to speak at Oak Point Church in Novi, asking people to contact the groups to object. Stevenson told the Detroit Free Press on Monday, quote, "We started getting complaints yesterday, and I talked to some people, and we just decided it's prudent to cancel it for now." End of quote. For now. They're going to probably reschedule them later and try and hide it as best they
Right.
can.
They'll probably hosted at a union hall somewhere.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, probably.
This guy has extensive tracks in Michigan, going back
Oh,
years.
absolutely. And the most violent police and military members you find anywhere on earth have tracks back to Michigan. Everyone I've ever researched.
Yep.
One in particular, James Steele, who has my last name, and I'm quite certain is a very close relative of mine, but that is all very difficult to find. And he is in Texas now, which is where the military is, but he owns a private military company of his own called RPM. I don't know if you guys have seen all the
No, I
all the
haven't.
RPM vans around. There's a company that is in town here that has RPM vans. I haven't confirmed that it's the same, but I definitely want to look into it because there are a lot of connections from the Steele family to that man, and it's
yeah. Stevenson, previously the Livonia police chief, said that, quote, "We got some complaints, the church got complaints," end of quote. He said, quote, "My hope is that I can put Colonel Grossman's people in touch with the people that have objections, and they can find out what he's really teaching and address their concerns," end of quote.
Dehumanization, murder. That's what he's teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we object to.
He calls it killology.
Yeah.
What?
Which is a science of killing.
Yeah.
I mean, just the basic semantic meaning of the words. It's the ability to kill and feel good about it. We need that today. We're teaching that today.
Yeah. No, and we're too busy going after 14-year-old girls for flipping somebody off on Snapchat to hold anybody accountable for it.
Exactly.
And we all feel empowered by some sort of legislative system or a government which is doing what? Helping the killology guy and locking up the 14-year-old girls. What is wrong with us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ass backwards.
It is. Grossman could not be reached for comment Monday by phone or email. In his bio on his website, he says he's the director of the Killology Research Group. His bio says that he has spoken, consulted, or advised extensively over the years, including in Michigan, to Michigan State Police, the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement, the Michigan Department of Corrections, police departments in Grand Rapids and Traverse City, Deputy Sheriff's Association of Michigan, the Macomb Criminal Justice Training Center, and Eastern Michigan University, among others. So, yeah, you want to know where the Grand Rapids cops get it from? Right there's your guy.
Darn right.
Yep, that's one of them. There's plenty of them, though, because keep in mind, this is also the home of Blackwater. We have a lot of privately contracted Federal Protective Services officers working right here. So,
absolutely.
yeah, and you can see it in their eyes. I was just going through my photos from the protest last summer and looking at the photos of the cops I have and the videos, and their faces, they are not human here. I've seen officers, I've seen pictures of them all over the country at this point over the past year. They don't look like these guys. Some of them do because they're in every city now. But our entire force, dude, they don't even look human. It scares me to see them.
You're not talking the black equipment. You're talking the facial expressions.
Their faces. Yeah, they're actual faces. And they're dressed like stormtroopers on top of that. But if you zoom in on their faces, they are not people. They are actual robots now.
Yeah.
The audacity. In this environment where we're talking about the lack of training to de-escalate, right in the shadow of maybe the most dynamic trial since O.J. Simpson, right?
I know.
That you're going to roll this guy into a church and think it's going to go through? I'd like to think the impact of Southpaws shook the state a week ahead early.
Right.
But I don't think that's the case.
I don't
What I think it is, it's so egregious, people actually spoke out, finally.
Here's part of his bio. Let me read some of this here. This is on his official website.
How is he not in jail? Because he runs the jail.
It's because he's on the road. They can't catch up to him. He's on the road.
Going to all the jails.
Exactly. Listen to this. Since his retirement from the U.S. Army in 1998, he has been on the road almost 300 days a year for over 19 years.
And we've paid for all of it. Who do you think is paying for it? It's us.
Exactly.
Unbelievable, Katy.
He's as one of our nation's leading trainers for military, law enforcement, mental health providers, and school safety organizations. Mental health providers. That's what really pisses me off right there.
Oh, so is he the one training the mental health people they're going to send out now instead of officers?
God, that's a scary thought.
Takes your breath away.
Unbelievable. Now listen to this. He has 5 patents to his name. He has published 4 novels, 2 children's books.
Stop it.
And
you
6
stop
nonfiction
it right now.
books. I wonder what the topics of his children's books are. How
Sex or killing.
There you go. Yeah.
Sure.
God. We can't make this up, folks. You can't make
Where
this
mommy
up at all.
Oh,
You see,
I
though,
can't.
with the fascist police force, though, this guy may have concluded there's a gold mine. If I can go out and ease in some way the pressure and justify some way the killing in the streets. I mean, look at Ayn Rand, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Ayn Rand, the Republicans have latched on to Ayn Rand because they've got a woman who is handing out, what's the word? An excuse, a rationalization
Justification.
for runaway greed.
Yep.
So they can sit in their mansions and not have any conscience at all. These guys are valuable. You know, who's the black politician? Scott? I can't think of his name.
Tim Scott.
Last night said there's just no racism in the United States. The United States is not a racist country. It's bizarre, but you know how valuable that is to the Republican mindset right now? To say that?
That's why we have the black police chief in Grand Rapids, right? Because if you can get a black person or a Native American person or an Asian person to say it, that's all you need. They made your case.
Yep, put an American flag on.
For the entire culture.
A black man with a little American flag on the lapel, speaking conservative agenda, and his future is unlimited.
Yep.
And then we have the Detroit police chief who demanded Rashida Tlaib resign from Congress because she's calling out for police reform.
Yeah, really.
Unbelievable. By the way, this guy has written and spoken about the psychology of killing and how soldiers and police can be trained to kill without feeling guilty. His book, On Killing, The Psychological Cost of Learning to Kill in War and Society, deals with how American soldiers learn to overcome reluctance. Now, here's one that is really going to shake you to your core.
Learn to overcome morality. Morality.
Mm-hmm. Now, this will shake you to your core. In 2003, he wrote a publication for the Michigan State Police Training Division titled Islamic Zealots, Corporate Predators, and the Attack on Democracy, A Moral Perspective on Our Current State of Affairs.
Wow.
Are you kidding me at this point?
What's startling to me is this jerk is this dormant for so many years, just operating in our police force, and we have no idea about it.
300 days a year he's on the road for 19 years. And we're just now, us, collective, just finding out about this in the last week or two.
Well, and I mean, a lot of it, I think, is it's hard to grasp that you can program people this way. It is really hard, and we're only now seeing it because of what data did to people through this last election. Are we starting to grasp it? And seeing their eyes on these videos, people are really going, what's actually happening here? How are these people becoming this way? And so I think that's why we're finally asking the right questions and digging this stuff up.
Yeah. Are you prepared to kill somebody? Read the title of a profile of him in 2017 by Mother Jones magazine that raised questions about his training. So we're not the first to start calling him out. Mother Jones did it first. And then a first-person article in Slate published last year on Grossman said, quote, a course from a prominent police trainer taught me to treat neighborhoods like battlegrounds and to always be ready to kill, end of quote. Critics have said his views encourage a militarization of local policing that can lead to more fatal police shootings. Oh, they don't even need militarization to do that. They don't care anymore. The event was to be held at Oak Point Church, a mega church with several branches in southeastern Michigan. In addition to Grossman, another police expert was set to speak. In a statement posted late Monday afternoon on its website, Oak Point Church distanced itself from Grossman, saying, quote, our mission of making disciples to know Jesus and make him known is not in line with, end of quote, Grossman's views.
Okay, so here's my question. At what point is this considered a coup?
Yeah.
At what point, because these police agencies are agencies of government, and they are not answering to the hierarchy of order as far as rank goes. They're not answering to the Attorney General of the state. So at what point do we say, okay, this is a coup, and take back the power, or attempt to take back the power? Because as of right now, we're just giving him more money, more power, and more training to kill us all.
Yeah. And if you do elucidate their brutality, they come back. We've seen that harder since the trial in Minnesota. They go in with, 8-9 cops?
Yeah.
And blow away a guy, shot it in the back of the neck. Tell me that wasn't a retaliation to the verdict coming out of Minnesota.
1,000%. And at the same time that they're barricading the police department downtown that we paid for with barricades that we paid for, they've got a mayor coming out and saying that she's going to bridge the gap between them and the community. And I'm going, okay, how are you going to do that when you're physically setting up cement barriers between them and the community
I know
as you speak?
I know what she's talking about. Matter of fact, Darren knows this gentleman, a radio voice in this city that would bring in a softball game with the police and the children. You remember?
Propaganda. That's some
our
propaganda
nemesis, right,
there.
Darren? And here he is. He's got the answer. And let the kids up first. Don't let the police up.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
I felt better after that game. I'll tell you that.
Well, one of these days I'm going to spill everything, but I have to wait for one person to die in order to do it. Then all bets are off.
I hope
Because dead people can't sue you for violating non-disparagement agreements. And I'll just leave it right there.
Southpaw history being mentioned here. A lot of definition we don't need right now. Yeah.
I'm going to skip down a little bit here. Stevenson said the training event that was initially planned, quote, wasn't meant for the line officer, end of quote, but more for police chiefs and executives who are dealing with how to cope with fatal police shootings. Well, here's what they're going to do. They're going to trickle it on down to their officers.
How many police chiefs are the ones actually out doing the shooting? They're in a donut shop telling everybody who to kill.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Wow.
This is going to get filtered down to the rank and file officers, if you want to call it that. Yeah, those just going to stop with the chief. That's not how it works.
Honestly, I want to know all of these training courses that our police officers are taking. I would bet that they're connected to this man. I bet the bike classes that they're taking and on how to assault people with their bicycles and all these different new tactics they're learning now. I bet it all comes back to the same.
Oh, I'm
structure of violence.
I'm going to skip down some more here in this article. In a video posted on April 22nd to Twitter, Grossman is heard talking about an officer saying the sex he had after shooting someone dead was the best sex he had. Grossman said it's, quote, a perk of the job, end of quote.
Yeah, I call BS on anybody having sex with him.
So I think maybe he's got a future in marriage counseling now. He can just broaden this right out.
That's true. That's true.
Yes.
There is a category for him.
Yeah.
I can help get rid of divorce.
That
Your wife
AR-15
gets
could
on
save a lot of marriages.
Exactly.
That's true.
Or it could end a lot of marriages. You get rid of divorce.
If you need to hold on to your property, though,
Yeah.
Property is very important to a lot of
completely
people.
reverse the structure of the debate. They completely reverse it. Instead of feeling sorry for the mutilated bodies of blacks, right? It's the police who are suffering emotionally.
You know what? You bring up a good point, Katy, talking about preserving the property. Because I'll just say it, my 83-year-old mother, one of her favorite shows on television is Forensic Files on HLN Network. And what's one of the big stories that they always seem to run about every fifth or sixth episode? Guy shoots and kills his wife. He doesn't want to divorce her because she'd get half of the property.
Yep.
There you go.
It happens all the time.
Exactly. Well, for decades in the South, it was not legally possible that in a divorce a woman could garnish any property. It was a law.
That she couldn't garnish?
She could, because what they rationalized was she's not going to ever seek her divorce because she knows she gets none of the house, she gets none of the property, she gets nothing.
We got to move off this topic because it's just making me angry. But good. Keep this idiot out of Michigan, please. He needs to retire. He needs to sit back, be unemployed, and just
I'm not a violent
person.
No. Why? He shouldn't get a pension. No.
Or whatever.
I'm not a violent person, but I do hope some people die.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes cancer hits the wrong people. So
sometimes
heart attacks.
it's the right people.
Yeah.
Nugent, we're not going to say any names.
Oh, man. I want to get to this story because this is some history here. And it's history that we have kind of forgotten about, have kind of whitewashed over the last 3 decades plus. This is Maya Casuto writing for National Public Radio. This is a story that came out on April 23rd. You guys have heard of MOVE, right? Called the MOVE, it's short for the movement. According to NPR, they began as a collective devoted to issues from police brutality to environmentalism. The group's relationship with local law enforcement quickly soured. This is in Philadelphia, is where they're based out of. They had several altercations throughout the 70s. In 1978, there was an eviction attempt in which a police officer was killed. Moves told the cops that the officer was a victim of friendly fire. Officials claim he was purposely shot. Well, yeah, you can claim he was purposely shot, but was he shot by the cops purposely? Right. There you go. Yeah. 9 members of the organization who all took the last name Africa were sentenced to prison. 2 of them died behind bars. The rest have since been released on parole after serving nearly 40 years. In May of 1985, because we're coming up on the 36th anniversary of this, there was another attempt to evict the group from his home in West Philadelphia. The city of Philadelphia flew a helicopter over the house and dropped a bomb on it. Literally dropped a explosive device which exploded, causing a fire. The fire department refused to control it. Various accounts suggest the police began shooting at members attempting to flee. Only 2 people escaped. 6 adults and 5 children died in the blaze. So, why are we talking about this now? Well, there's an NPR story that has come out that the remains of 2 of the children who were killed in the move bombing had been held by a forensic pathologist. The remains are missing now. They can't find them. I'm going to continue here. A forensic pathologist produced reports on the human remains found in the debris, including 2 sets of bones identified as belonging to 14-year-old Tree Africa and 12-year-old Delijah Africa. Mike Africa Jr., a current MOVE member who spent his childhood with the group, remembered Tree as fearless, someone who would find the tallest tree in the park and race to its peak. Delijah, he said, was always right behind her. After an investigation into the bombing, the remains were given to anthropologist Alan Mann by the city's medical examiner's office. That's according to the MOVE Philadelphia Special Investigation Commission letters for further analysis. At the time, Mann worked at the University of Pennsylvania. When he transferred to Princeton University in 2001, he reportedly took the bones with him. Researchers connected to the schools also used the girls' bones in an online forensic anthropology teaching video without permission of the relatives' families. That the MOVE bones were still being held by the universities was not widely known before revelations were published last week by the online news site Billy Penn. It has led to public outrage as controversy builds over American Museum's display and study of human remains. Just last week, the University of Pennsylvania's Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology pledged to repatriate another group of problematic human remains known as the Morton Collection. So now these remains of these 2 children are gone. Princeton University says they don't have them. Alan Mann says he doesn't have them. It is disgusting what we do to the human remains of primarily Native Americans and African Americans.
I was reading a Facebook discussion this week about the local museum, the Grand Rapids Public Museum, and somebody mentioned that there used to be fetuses, actual fetuses in jars at the museum.
Yes.
They said they remember seeing them as a kid, and I was like, wait, in Grand Rapids? What?
Yes, in Grand Rapids. Yeah. What's the exhibit that goes around? Bodies Revealed?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen that? I saw it the first time it came through.
I didn't see it, but it's very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Very explicit.
Well, it's explicit, but it's also, people are not happy about it. Those were supposedly victims of torture, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chinese torture victims, I believe is what I had read.
There's another museum in Chicago, and I cannot remember the name of it, but they also have a display on human embryos and the growth of fetuses. And they have fetuses there. They have dissections of fetuses. It's just something else.
Where is the public museum in Grand Rapids?
It's the one downtown, the one by the river.
That's not a public museum. I'm doing this facetiously. That's DeVos's museum.
Right.
That was bought by DeVos. The commission that runs that are appointed people around town. That is not a public museum. I've walked in and asked them, I said, where's the public museum? I go right to the ticket. Oh, it's right here. I said, no, it's not. Did they tell you this is a public museum? Does it say it on the ticket? This is not a public museum. And if anybody in Grand Rapids would press it, they'd find out that moniker is absolutely inaccurate.
That
he
is
took
insane.
over the public museum It's controlled completely
So
by
he
the
just
bosses.
owns all of our history now? Everything people that have donated to the museum?
Yeah, I took kids through all the time, as a teacher.
Yeah.
And I noticed all of a sudden, after the transfer was made, it was a public museum. at one
Right,
time,
right.
But he didn't dare change the name. It's the same trick they use with public schools.
Privatization, yeah.
Exactly. They still call them public schools. But the thing is, there was a big display about Manifest Destiny.
Yeah.
The very key that allowed the annihilation and genocide of the American native, right?
Yep.
And it was on the wall before it was privatized. Suddenly, it's nowhere to be
Immediately
seen because
gone.
I would stop and show the kids. They control and they edit
Yep.
what you see under the guise that it's a public museum.
And the same as they control all of our history. They hire the historian.
Yep.
If you look at the city historian, Gordon Olson in Grand Rapids from 1975 until 2000 and around 8 or 10, he also wrote the biography for the DeVosses and Amway.
There you go. That's
Like,
convenient.
come on, man.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you look at any Grand Rapids history for the last 75 years, everybody will refer you to him or books he has written.
It came through his screen.
One person.
Yes,
Yep.
right. Yeah, and in that same vein, Repuke down in Louisiana just yesterday, insisted that the public schools start teaching the good parts of slavery.
Yes.
Did you hear that?
Yes, I saw that. That they sent out an email basically just denouncing the whole civil rights era.
Right. So January 6th, give it a couple
Wow.
years. January 6th was a hoax. Never really did happen.
Right.
Okay. The genocide in Europe, called the Holocaust, is really overblown. It maybe not even happened.
Right,
really.
right. Who even knows?
The American Indian, they were trying to kill themselves as it was.
They were savages.
The savages. The blacks, they had slaves over in Africa. So what's the big deal of bringing 100 million slaves over?
Just saw somebody yesterday in a local Facebook group discuss how her Dutch ancestor was scalped in this one area, and by an Indian. They were scalped by an Indian, and there used to be a marker there to mark. And I just went, I have to turn it off and walk away. I have to walk away.
Historic propaganda, just like the Alamo. You want to study about the Alamo? So it's total myth. It wasn't anything like what you were told, okay? But I want to go back to the one thing. You're talking about scalps. It was proven unequivocally. Scalping was now this is a lot of money. I think it was $50 you were paid by the U.S. government to turn in Indian scalps. It was not the other way
it
around.
wasn't the other way around. That makes
And you know
perfect
down
sense.
south, when you see those good old boys at the bar and they got that hat with the feathers on the
Yup,
top,
yup.
that's a derivation. That came down because the American military soldiers would remove the uterus of the Indians and drape them on the fronts of their hat.
Oh, for
That's
God's
where
sakes.
that came from. That is not a stretch. That is categorized empirical information from the woman who wrote "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee."
I
If
believe
anybody
it.
wants to challenge that historically.
Man,
believe
and
it.
like we mentioned earlier in the show too, don't forget Tim Scott saying there's no such thing as racism in
no
this
such
country.
thing.
Yeah.
Any book I've ever read pre-1900 was all racism. That's all it is, beginning to end.
True. Very true.
Unbelievable. Well, I want to get to this story real quick here. This is Paul Singer. This was originally at National Public Radio. It's also at WGBH, the public TV station out of Boston. Here's what they did. WGBH TV did not really a scientific study, but a study nonetheless. They dropped 100 different letters in different post office boxes across Boston that were going to 38 different states. Here's what they found out. I'm just going to read this here. On Monday morning, April 5th, a WGBH news editor dropped a letter into a mailbox outside the U.S. Post Office in Central Square in Cambridge. The letter was addressed to a family member in Memphis, Tennessee. 3 weeks later, that letter had not arrived. 3 weeks for first-class letters. Another news editor sent a letter the same day to Berkeley, Michigan from the massive Fort Point Channel Post Office. That took 2 weeks to arrive. Here's the standard by the Postal Service. This is their own standard, 1 to 3 business days for first-class mail. Your average letter that's got a 55-cent stamp or forever stamp on it. 1 to 3 days. So, again, they tested it. They sent 100 letters from different places in the metro Boston area at various hours on the same day to correspondents of their own choosing in 38 states. So this is a random sample. The letters were addressed to residents of large cities, suburbs, and small towns. The experiment was designed to recreate what might be the experience of an ordinary user of the U.S. Postal Service. The Postal Service did not pass the test given by WGBH-TV. Half of their letters arrived within the 3-day window. By Friday of that week, much of the mail had arrived. There were still 10 letters wandering around the country looking for their addresses. A letter to rural Virginia arrived April 13th. A letter to Washington, D.C. took another 3 days. As of April 22nd, there were 2 letters that they could not account for. They're lost in the mail. Unbelievable.
Yeah, this doesn't surprise any of us that have used the Postal Service in the last few months.
Oh, exactly.
No, not at all.
Half of your stuff is getting lost. You're not sending anything important because there's a good chance it's just going to disappear. My thing is, where's it going?
Yeah.
Somebody's
Good
taking
question.
it. Somebody is taking it. I don't know who, but it doesn't just disappear, this much mail.
Yep.
It just
No.
doesn't.
It certainly doesn't. It's been sitting on docks. I know that for a fact because I had a postal employee tell me this.
And
by
Biden's
the-
inept in getting rid of LaJoy. That's a bigger mystery
that's
to me.
the thing. Why doesn't he
Because
fill
they're
the
working
vacancies?
together. This is not about helping the United States,
right.
you guys. It's
Another
about
corporation
helping
guy.
the oligarchs.
Yep.
Exactly.
When it comes down to it, they're all in the same boat, and they're all working against us.
And let
Same
me
club,
let me
for sure.
remind everybody, there is only one agency that is specifically mentioned in the Constitution that the federal government must have it, and that is the United States Postal Service. It is constitutionally required.
Well, did you see that they were using the United States Postal Service to spy on?
Yeah.
We talked
Yeah,
about that
right.
last week.
Oh yeah, okay, that's right. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, and actually I want to clarify that. It's not the Postal Service, it's the Postal Inspection Service that's doing that.
So what they're saying is,
So
if
it's
we
the
have
law
to have,
enforcement agency.
if we have to have a U.S. Postal Service, we're going to use it for law enforcement and for surveillance. That's
Of
what they're
course,
saying.
why waste that?
Exactly,
You kidding?
and we're going to steal mail.
Sure.
That's honestly what I think is happening. I think
Yeah.
I trust the police much less than I trust my neighbors. So
Oh.
when I see all these car
No
thefts, 1,700 cars from Kent County in 1 month stolen. Where are they going?
Yeah.
Where are they going with the mail? And you're telling me the cops can't find? I think they're taking it. Personally, that is my opinion.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be
I
a
wouldn't be
surprise
surprised
to me.
at all.
I mean, the precious metals for catalytic converters are worth more than half of these vehicles. So somebody's scrapping them, somebody's taking them in, and if nobody's getting arrested for it, just saying.
I was telling Jack this morning, I said, what needs to happen, you want to get DeJoy out of the post office? Here's what needs to happen. Bernie Sanders needs to get on national television and start pounding the table and screaming his bloody head off and saying, this needs to be fixed now.
Yep. That's right. The post office is sacrosanct to most Americans, even on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
And if you really expertly, as Bernie would do, show how critical it is right now, there'd be a response.
I love Bernie, but we're in that position with journalism. We're in that position with the post office. We're in that position with the military and the police department.
That's right. Take your pick.
I think he's doing his best, but it's like, what do we
Yeah.
do?
Then that's the problem.
Which one is
we-
the priority at this point? Because they're all got the ability to take us out.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And that's why I just keep screaming so loud about how we cannot keep acting like we're helping by playing into these systems they're handing us as solutions. Like, we're just siphoning all of our resources and money to the 5 or 10 people that are in control of the entire world.
Yeah.
All of them. Our water, our precious metals. What are they going to do with that? Use it to get the hell out of here and leave us behind on Planet Prison.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did it with continents, right?
Yep.
We gorged out Africa.
Yep.
They literally sat down in a conference and divided it with countries. Portuguese, you can have this natural resource, whatever it is, whatever it was.
They've already settled or whatever the universe, outer space, basically. They've already decided who's going to be in
Sure.
control of what out
Yeah.
there without asking any of us.
This
So-
is not a new tendency.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they already, I think they said 2050, Elon Musk wants to have like 1 million people to the moon. By 2050, it was what his plan was. But my guess is if you're not one of those people, you're done. And nobody's going to make it here past that.
Yeah, the rich out of New York, Vanderbilts or Rockefellers, I don't know who it was, went to Africa and they found out they needed rubber for the tires, right?
Right.
And they completely took all of the black people and made them rubber gatherers. No pay.
Yeah.
right.
And they
Just like they
showed
did
baskets
cotton.
of hands that were cut off because they didn't collect enough rubber.
We still have that issue with the chocolate industry, and that's something we talked about on this show. they're still using little kids to harvest cocoa beans in some areas
Oh, yeah,
of the
child
world.
labor is still very, very big. And they're trying, if you look at what they're doing here with the high schools, all this free labor now, it's ridiculous.
The indigenous people that Columbus enslaved to gather gold, there's a saying that came out. They said the Spaniards must eat gold. They couldn't figure out where it was going. There was so much they were taking. They said they must be able to eat gold.
To eat it.
And they were serious.
Wow. Unbelievable. Well, we're running out of time, so I want to get to a couple of off-the-cuff stories. The first one comes from the BBC. An IT teacher who threatened pupils and took some to a strip club while he was drunk during a school trip has been banned from teaching for 3 years. Richard Glenn's behavior was so unacceptable he was sent home early during Longridge Tower School's trip to Costa Rica in July of 2019. He was dismissed in August of 2019. The 55-year-old admitted to gross misconduct.
This is why I didn't go into teaching.
One perk. One guy gets a perk.
So he was drinking with students and taking them to the strip joints.
He was just trying to show them the other side of education, you know?
Which I didn't know there were any strip joints in Costa Rica. I learned something new.
To serve with love, remember?
That's funny because the one strip joint owner from Grand Rapids I knew lived in Costa Rica. So.
Yeah, that's very true. That is true because I used to work for that too. Oh, God. And then the last one here is out of Norman, Oklahoma. Karen McBride used to live in the Norman, Oklahoma area. Supposedly, she rented the videotape Sabrina the Teenage Witch back in 1999 and never returned the tape. She doesn't remember ever watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch. She believes that one of her roommates at the time rented it under her name. The tape never got returned, so guess what happened? They filed an arrest warrant for her, but never executed it.
They never executed her either.
She moved to Texas. She moves to Texas. She gets married. She goes to change her name. They said, "Hey, you do realize you have an outstanding warrant for your arrest." She's like, "What? Why?"
Yeah, right.
And here's the thing. This video store has been closed since 2009.
Listen, if anybody asks, I have never seen Barney's Christmas or any of the Power Ranger videos. Ever.
We need to laugh.
By the way, prosecutors did drop all the charges.
I saw this. They went to her house with 7 policemen in a pickup truck,
What?
right? Then when they shot, no, that's not her. Oh, that was the black guy. I'm sorry. I got mixed up.
The black guy that was driving after dark.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, folks, we're out of time for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Katy Steele.
I'm Jack Prince.
Please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.